eaten by the world.
So, yeah, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining in. So we're just letting people are arriving, we're letting people in. So yeah, I'll do a little bit of introduction and hopefully everyone will have arrived then by the time we're screening the film. So I'm Emma Meehan and I'm based at the Centre for Dance Research at Coventry University. And I set up the Somatic Practice and Chronic Pain Network with Bernie Carter. And now it's run by a board. And we're here to launch the film Through My Eyes with My Body, which was created by Andrea Wright, Ulanah Morris, and Noorafshan Mirza. So I'll be handing over to them in a little bit to talk about the process of making the film. So just a few kind of welcoming things. So of course, this, we're exploring chronic pain in this. So everyone who's here, of course, please remember to look after your own body. So that might be finding a position you want to be in, standing, sitting, whatever feels comfortable, and feel free to move around. You can have your camera on or off, depending what suits you. If you can keep the audio off at the moment, later there'll be a chance to ask questions, but just so that there isn't kind of clashing sounds. So what else is there to say? Thank you for taking the time to join us. We'd love to know who you are so we can welcome you properly. So if you want to drop, kind of just say in the chat where you are and who you are, you're welcome to do that. And thanks for coming. We do have some guidelines we sent around by email about engaging with the event. So I'll drop those in the chat again, so you have them. And these guidelines were created by Andrea, Bernie Carter, Rosa Cisneros, Eugenia Kim, and me. And it was just really about creating space for people who might be marginalized, around, creating a space where people feel listened to, respected, that people will reflect on their own biases, and that we'll celebrate difference. So today we're just inviting you to really listen, take time to notice your own kind of body responses. You might write them down, you might move as you're watching and listening. And then later when we're discussing, it's, I suppose, kind of talking from I statements, talking about your own personal experience, your emotions and sensations, and just taking time, I suppose, and care with how we're responding. Let's see, was there anything else that I felt we should say? So the film was funded by the UKRI COVID-19 fund. So we're really grateful for that as well. During earlier in the pandemic, we couldn't do in-person activities. So this was one of the ways we might share the work more widely with people when we weren't able to meet. But now it also means, this kind of work can be shared much more widely than if we were only in a room together. So we're really happy about the funding for that. And the event will be recorded as well, so we can share it with more people. So if you don't want to be visible, you might want to keep your camera off. So yeah, we're getting a few comments from people. Welcome Ulanah as well. Gina is joining with a group of her students in Greece. Thank you. And Ian is joining us. So yeah, feel free to say hello in the chat, and we'd love to know where you are as well. So now I'm going to hand over. Yes, Gina and students. I'm going to hand over to Andrea, Noorafshan, and Ulanah. And I'd love to hear a bit about your process of making the film, and yeah, a bit about yourselves as well, who you are. Yeah, so I'll hand over to you.
Good morning, everybody. It's so lovely to see you here, and some familiar faces and some new ones. So thank you so much for taking the time to just share this space together. My name is Andrea Wright. I live in London. I work in London. I work in private practice. I'm a musculoskeletal physiotherapist. And I guess I have an interdisciplinary work profile, because I also work as a somatic educator, a shamanic practitioner, and a facilitator. And I, into my early career of aspiring career researcher. So I have done some previous work within professional physiotherapy, looking at inequalities for those communities who have marginalized identities. And yeah, really very pleased to be here and have created this wonderful piece of work with Ulanah and Noor. So I'll just hand over to the both of them to introduce themselves.
We're being gracious, Noor. Do you want to go next, or shall I?
I was struggling with the unmuting.
Right.
Easy. Either I'm happy if you want to introduce yourself, Ulanah.
I can wait. Go for it.
All right. Hello, everyone. Hello. And my name is Noorafshan, and my background, or yeah, most of the work that I do is centered around expression through the creative arts. And so I have a very interdisciplinary, intersectional practice. I've done a lot of work that mostly centers collaboration or working collectively. So film and video runs through my practice, but also I've done a lot of work of holding space. I'm a long-term pedagogue. I work with pedagogy, both as a long-term learner myself, co-learning spaces, and I'm also, in terms of my creative work, I'm also expanding into performance, or where yeah, the body, you know, where the body resides and expresses itself primarily, which led me to somatics. So in that role, I'm also a footballer. I was a former amateur boxer. I'm also starting and embarking a journey on coaching in football. So girls, working with young girls. That's what brings me today, is this intersectionality between the academic, the pedagogic, community organizing, all through the lens of creative expression.
Amazing. I like to listen to my colleagues. I get impressed every time I hear them. My name's Ulanah Morris. What am I? I'm a professional mindful recovery tutor and coach, life coach and spiritual counselor. I lean strongly into, well, I do a lot of work around mindfulness facilitation, mindfulness groups. My background, professionally, education and psychology, but also my background is very much around, I guess, voice work and singing, movement and dance, Kundalini yoga as well. Currently, one of the most important things that I'm doing, or something that takes up quite a bit of my creativity and my emotional energy, is a program called Mindful Conversations on Race, which very much relates to the work that we're doing, that we just did, or what we just did. I think it's still in process, really, this work around somatics and pain. So it's about how we navigate conversations around race in safe spaces. So I guess one of the main things that I do, whatever I do, whether it's teaching psychology, working around supporting people in mental health in the National Service, really I'm about creating safe space, working holistically with people around their feelings, their thoughts, their bodies, and so on. So I was really grateful to be invited to join in this project, and was able to lean into my personal experiences through art and creativity, as well as my professional experience. So yeah, that's very generally myself.
So I guess, and then we can kind of jump in together really, just a little bit about the creative process. So I'll start, if that's okay. I think with the invitation to, as you had alluded to, Emma, to create something with this funding, which is really generous, and just want to nod to our funders who supported us in that. And I guess I wanted the work that we did to be nothing prescriptive, by way of a resource that goes onto the website, the Pain and Somatic Practice website. But I wanted it to be really an exploration that opened up different perspectives from different voices that I guess traditionally haven't been heard. And so my driving impetus was really that this video doesn't necessarily create solutions, but perhaps opens up more questions and deep thought and reflection. And so I haven't worked with Noor before. I hadn't worked with Ulanah, although we knew each other before. And so I approached the two of them to work on this project. And I think the big main thing, the take home for me, was how do I, as a person who's leading the project then, or the main, I guess, contact, create a collaborative space that really kind of deconstructs power and hierarchies and a way of dictating what needs to be done. And so that was the very impetus, or the way that we approach the work, which is quite challenging to do, actually, to have a leadership role, as well as to democratize, I guess, decision making and where the flow of the work will take us. So, but I think the way that, for me at least, the way in which we did that was really, really underpinned by a lot of care. And so we were very careful and thoughtful in the way that we approached coming together with a very, very deliberate act of being very careful and caring with each other in the work, because of the nature of the topic, and also just because I think it's important, or it's important for me at least, to model the things that I believe in by way of my values. So if anybody wants to.
Yeah, if we're gonna, yes. So yeah, just add to that. So I've done a lot of collaborative practice, but I don't feel like I'd worked in this way before. And I just want to kind of like put in there that filmmaking in itself is so traditionally hierarchical. And I know that our ways, and I practice that, ways of being sort of distributive, so like power with rather than power over. But it's almost like you have to constantly keep attending to that, because it just creeps in. It always creeps in around even just practical things like who can control the camera, who has the skills to operate the camera, creates a separation within a group unless everyone has gone through camera training, skill up. So it's like I was always really mindful of the way that hierarchies and divisions, even of divisions of labor, would constantly be seeping in. So for me, it was really this deep practice of listening to each other, co-creating space. And again, like you said, I didn't know either Andrea or Ulanah, So creating a space of safety and space of trust, and holding that, and also it shifting in terms of how that was held or distributed, was such a quite amazing but also challenging, and very bodily, you know. So I think back to, and also for me, this was a time where we were still, I feel like I was still coming out of a deep space of contraction, self-isolation through the pandemic. So even being in community, or even beingness with other bodies, was an estrangement. So it was a kind of really beautiful, but again, it set off for me a lot of internal processes, and sharings. So that's how I think about, and I don't even know if I could repeat this process. I think the process might actually be different if we continue to collaborate together. I think there would be another depth, or another way, or another unfolding of beingness in space, through technology, through expression, through the deep kind of, for me, internalized experience of being a person of color, a woman of color, in white spaces, in white culture, in white structures. I'm still on that journey of touching that and unpacking that myself.
Okay, so resonating, thank you, you both, resonating with both of you in terms of the, I would say, organic nature of this, highly collaborative and co-productive. From a blank page. So it was like that. So in that way, it was exciting, but at the same time, it was also scary, because we didn't know at times where, you know, what was going to come up and what we were going to do with it. But there was a high degree of trust, I think, trust of each other. We're excited to be around each other. We're excited to come out of the pandemic. We're excited to meet each other. And our first meeting was beside the water, with water near to where Noor lives. So that was really wonderful. And we brought excitement and real a sense of adventure, I guess. Can you still hear me? Yeah, a sense of adventure, I guess, with the whole process. So it was highly exploratory, a lot of care, compassion, and love was in the process. And I suppose playfulness, I think I would say as well. It was very important to have that playfulness and to explore joy, because what's on the other side of joy? It's pain, okay? So of course, there were hugely joyful moments where we felt really wrapped in support and love by each other, because other meetings were had in each other's homes, and where we fed each other, nourished each other. But of course, what comes up if you're dealing with pain is pain. And so what was wonderful for me was meeting two sisters of color, to explore how it's been to live, to operate in white spaces, and to tune into my own lived experience of psychological wounds, but also of a physical health challenge that I live with. You know, what is it to be a Black woman in a professional spaces with something like a blood disorder? You know, how does that influence the way I am, and how open can I be about that? So that was really interesting for me. What was also interesting, I think I might have touched on it, is the meeting of people of color. So meeting of people of color where the potential for mirroring is high, where the potential for, you know, exploring ourselves through looking at each other, and yeah, examining how we've been impacted on by the environment that we've been living in. So one last thing, I could say more, but there's one last thing, we don't have forever. But the notion of leadership and fellowship, I think is quite, somebody offered that to me last year when I was talking about the Mindful Conversations Around Race program that I facilitate. You know, what we did beautifully is that we followed at times so that the leadership changed. Yeah. And Andrea beautifully sat back at times, even though often I found myself looking to her because the project came through her. But it became clear that actually we all could take the role of leader at a particular point by inviting people to explore particular things, or, you know, deciding or suggesting that we went in a certain way as opposed to another way. So I think that's generally what I'd like to say now. Yeah, thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for sharing that insight. I think it's always really interesting for people not to just see a finished output, but hear how something unfolds as well, and people kind of backgrounds behind it. And I'm really grateful as well that you all trusted us as well to do this work with the network. And I always really enjoyed getting the updates from Andrea about what you were exploring, you know. So I guess the next thing is to share the film, which everyone is here to see. And I forgot to mention, you know, there's a lot of people sort of working in the background, helping with all sorts of technical things. So Algo is helping with the registration for the event, and we have Anjum Kozer today helping. So hopefully we won't have any technical hitches.
White society at large isn't used to Black and people of colour speaking clearly about their truth, and especially in regards to naming behaviours that are fueled by white supremacist thinking, which really chooses to diminish the agency of those that is othered. And it can be so subtle, this behaviour, and at times blatant. But this is a privilege afforded to white people who enact a mindset of whiteness, to not expect challenge or to tacitly expect deference. And speaking up and naming behaviours that are harmful can often cause a backlash and often tears, and those tears can be used as a defence to not taking ownership of harmful behaviours, as well as signalling a fragility which essentially shifts the power dynamics of the person crying as being the victim of the harm. A Black woman's experience. Forever serving in service of, never putting themselves first, always putting others in front of their own needs, never centering their own needs as being as important. And I think the legacy of that also spills out in society as how we put the needs of others before our own, trying to soothe others, making them feel comfortable, and particularly in white spaces, making white people feel comfortable, right? that's a legacy, right? Making our black brothers feel comfortable, right? Because they're emasculated, right, in a white supremacist system, right? So even though some of their behaviours are misogynistic and toxic, we internalise a set of narratives that wants to soothe the black psyche, right, as well, male psyche as well, you know, as well as soothing white people, you know. But if we're too angry, or if we're too loud, or if we're too strong, we have to somehow shrink ourselves because we're concerned with how we may be. When you see me in my solidity, the strength in my bones, carrying the stature of my beings, the length and breadth of my back, that like my ancestors bore the weight of the greed that tore them from their lands, their families, and their homes. Yet it disturbs you when I show my strength in the clarity of my words, defining my agency to be understood as aggressive or pushy. You see me when you witness the liquid flow of my nature and the joy of my smile and ease of my being. Yet, how do you react when I assert my boundaries and say no? Do you see me not as a team player, but as being difficult or obstructive? You see me like vapor, invisible to the eye, moving seamlessly in the world, just as everyone else is. And yet, when I make visible my lived experience, inviting you to see me. With a multitude of nuanced expressions, the complexity of my material existence disturbs you. And it is true. I can inhabit all of these states, yet to be these things is to embody them and more. My superpower is not one-dimensional. It is not limited to your experience of my human existence as a stereotype, a trope, and a fiction from the colonial imagination, or at worst, my internalization of such lies.
To be with something not being easy for me and to admit it, almost like I'm buying into the sense of, you know, the image or the stereotype of me as a black body as somewhat being not good enough or not enough or a failure even. So I want to pretend like everybody else that I'm, you know, that everything's okay and I'm perfect. Well, of course I know I'm not, and I know that's not the intention, but at some level there's a conditioning around that. The conditioning, around being who I am, just real, in pain and struggling and anxious, and not being able to run for a few months or do, you know, really challenging yoga postures, you know, because I need to take care of my body. I need to look after it. I am a spectacle. The hue of my skin, a fascination. My hair, a knotted puzzle. How long does it take you to do that? How often do you wash it? Can I touch it? The signature curve of my back, my rounded backside, a shapely bane of my life. So how is it to be present with my pain? There are many pains, but the one that's kind of really front and central for me at the moment is the physical one, which is an injured hip and pain in my right leg. And so I noticed that I was able to move just now without feeling any twinges, and I was really enjoying movement. And then I thought, hold on now, but actually you could be giving
some attention, some noticing to the fact that there is this pain, this soreness, and you could share it with the group. But my tendency is to ignore, to deny the pain, and to proceed as if there's nothing wrong. It's like to project this image of strength in the world. As if it doesn't matter that other people's pain is more important than mine, and I can't be fragile, I can't be vulnerable. Being in denial and not giving myself enough self-care, but at the same time doing sometimes, but really struggling with, that tendency to soldier on. That's the best term I can use at the moment. Just, keep going as if nothing's wrong, as if all is well, all will be well. And of course it could be, but let's just admit that, there is something that needs attention. And the thing is my body. And the voicing that it's giving, the messages that it's trying to convey. Someone said to me over the weekend, Ulanah, what if the pain in your hip and your leg are your ancestors' pain, and that actually this is not about the current moment? And I thought, oh, wow. Now there's a thought. There's a thought. Because we have experiences in this lifetime, but we also, I understand, from much of the work that's been done around somatics and, the way that we hold pain in our bodies, that actually we can, our neural pathway kind of holds those kinds of memories and within it, and we can indeed feel the chains and the shackles. I have at times felt chained, literally, not just energetically, but like I'm, I'm experiencing that sense of being enslaved, and almost hearing the clanking of the chains that trying to do my business. Maybe this relates to why I'm so, I don't know. Whose body? What cost? Work. Yeah. Work. Yeah. Whose cost? It's all the dollar. Who pays, man? Who pays? Your narrative and the slowness of your narrative, which was kind of matching your movements as you were moving with yourself, asking the question. And so I'm thinking about rest, and I'm thinking about that as a disruption to the grind culture. Our bodies being products of cultural capital, yeah. We grind, we work, we hold such a lot. We soldier on. Black women, we soldier on. We're tough, we're hard, we are strong, right? Invincible. But also our sense of self-worth being intimately and intricately and problematically wrapped up in our sense of doing, our sense of worth, the fact that we have to do, we have to produce, we have to do everything but be. And in our being, can we be tired? Can we be vulnerable? Can we rest and turn down the dial and give ourselves space to feel? Give ourselves space to feel. Let me say it again, give ourselves space to feel. What is it that we need in that moment?
that we need, not what somebody else needs, but what we need. So I would love there to be some place for us to be at rest, to give ourselves permission to be at rest as a disruption of the ways that our systems push us. The busyness, the capitalist mindset, the way in which we're driven to do and not be, i.e. me being a human being. The landscape is written against that. Me being a human being as a racialized person, black. I wasn't supposed to be human, right? Right? I didn't have rights as a human being. So how do I reclaim my beingness in my behaviors, in the ways that I carry or want to be in the world? Rest has to be part of that, so I can feel.
So thank you so much for sharing that film, and sorry for the technical hitch in the middle. I'm picking that up again, and the link is in the chat if you want to rewatch it again at a later stage. Sorry, I had to turn off some people's videos in the middle of that so it could go into the full screen. You can put them back on shortly. So we do have a response. I don't know, Andrea, if you want to come on for a moment to say anything about Jackie's response, or do you want us just to play it?
I think probably just to play it, but that is to say, Jackie Walumbe is a colleague and a researcher who's just actually got her PhD, which is a fantastic thing. And we've done a little bit of research together, working in the physiotherapy field. So yeah, I'm really pleased to have her voice here, and yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kozer. Are you able to share it? Yes. Okay. Any problems, just let me know.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to record my response to watching this wonderful video that was presented that represents the experiences of women, women from marginalized spaces, people of color, living in a slightly violent world, and my own responses to it. So I am clearly visibly different to the majority of people that I interact with in my day-to-day life. And I just was really struck by how visceral this performance was. There was honesty in it. There was space in the pauses, the mix of language, the written words, the energy that just allowed me to pause and for myself to reflect about the experiences that I continue to live through every day. And I am so grateful for the performers, for the artists, for the filmmakers, for the poets, for the wonderful way of really expressing so many of our own experiences. I felt this performance viscerally. It really made me try and understand better, not just my own point of view, but others and the people that I care for or have the privilege to walk through or walk with in this life. So just thank you.
Right, thanks for sharing that. So yeah, we thought it would just be nice to have a moment to have Jackie reflect there, because her background is always also in pain management, and also to give you as participants a moment to let the film kind of settle in you, hear someone's response, and for you to have an opportunity yourself to reflect on your own response. So now is a chance for you who have come along. So if you move around, take a breath, write some notes, please feel free to do that. And I'm going to invite Andrea and Ulanah and Noor to come and turn your videos back on. As people take a moment to transition. So I've written down here, what is it we need in this moment, and about reclaiming beingness. And Jackie's comment about, allowing pause. So yeah, thank you again. So we have some time. We have comments coming in already. So very deep, a moving and deeply insightful film. Thank you for sharing this deep and meaningful work. Congratulations. On behalf of all the students present and myself, we send our heartfelt thanks and apologies for having to leave soon. Ulanah's video is not coming on, so I'll see if I can fix that for you. And Funmi has a comment here. Thank you for the film. I loved watching the exchange between the two artists and watching them move and converse. The pauses made it really moving, reflective and calm. So I'll just go in now and see if I can turn on Ulanah's camera. Here's Ulanah. Ask to start video. Hopefully that'll work. Of course, anyone else who wants to turn on their video now, so you're welcome to either, you can comment in the chat, or you can raise your hand and ask a question, or you can be quiet if you wish. It's up to you. So yeah, so if no one else is jumping in just yet, I had a few questions. I suppose the first one I was really interested in, when you had mentioned, Andrea, this idea of not giving solutions, so it's kind of like a process. And I was curious about that, because I know you have a background both in health but also in somatics, and exploring pain. Of course, you are in the health world, so it might be about solution focus and how can you resolve chronic pain, whereas what you were doing with the film is more exploring and opening things up. So I don't know if you had some comments on that you wanted to make. I'd be interested to hear.
Thank you for the question, Emma. I think you're absolutely right. That is coming from the tradition of physiotherapy. We are traditionally solution-focused professionals, and I think we are less inclined to orientate towards process, and that's for many reasons, in terms of logistics, and I guess the way that physiotherapy emerged as a standalone professional offering, as it were. But I think, I guess, in the context of the somatics practice and pain network, I thought it would be helpful because, in my experience, there hadn't been any, I guess, reflection specifically around marginalized bodies by way of chronic pain as such. I didn't want to come with a prescriptive one-size-fits-all. I just want to make it clear as I'm speaking that, you know, even though I'm speaking as a Black woman, this isn't a totalizing kind of umbrella interpretation. This is coming from my experience and Ulanah's experience, and that coming from Noor as a person of color. So again, I just want to problematize or just kind of shake the idea of this is, I'm not speaking for all Black women here, because again, yet there are still intersections that need to be spoken to and spoken to specifically. So that said, I think the perspective that we wanted to highlight here was really one that showed, perhaps for the first time, aspects of our experience that weren't considered before. I think, that really was trying to just lay bare as much information and data so that the viewer can look at it rather than necessarily take it as a given. So it's like, oh, what does that stir in you as a viewer? What questions come up for you as a viewer? And hopefully, you know, my desire and aspiration is that it begins a dialogue really of what hasn't been looked at before, and or, you know, what we can't necessarily hold, or what's difficult to hold. And I think this is where the strength of the somatic practice hopefully offers us. We've been dealing with difficult material that's unknown. What the somatic practice help us to do by way of these challenging conversations.
Great, thank you. I know we have another question from Ian, so if you would like to ask Ian.
Yeah, thank you for everyone who's been involved in producing the film. And so, you know, quite clearly I'm a male and I'm white and middle-aged, so I kind of feel like I should just say that. I recently was involved in a sort of a very lengthy process with a good friend of mine, a woman who is a person of color who had who's experienced a lot of problems since her teens with being treated unfairly. So we went through the sort of, my fiance and I, in a very small, intimate group, went through a process with her, and we had to learn a lot. We read the book White Fragility, and kind of had to really, it's a lot of work to kind of tread very carefully around this topic. So I just wonder what are your thoughts on the size of the groups that are needed, or what scale this topic can be dealt with? From my experience, it needs to be very small, intimate, kind of dealt with on a personal level, as well as understanding the statistics around systemic, you know, the systemic issue of racism, which you can't argue with the stats that there's a problem systemically. But I think what was beautiful about your video it was intimate, and it felt like a conversation in a very small group. So how do we, if we're dealing with something that's like systemic, but we also need the intimacy. Do you agree we need that intimacy, or are there other ways to kind of address a systemic issue?
Can I jump in, Andrea? Are you speaking directly?
Yes, I mean, I was offering.
Yeah, just because, I'm only jumping in because currently I'm engaged in those kind of conversations in groups with people in Camden and Islington NHS Trusts around the mindful conversations around race program. Be the change. I keep calling it that, but it began as mindful conversations. Now it's Be the Change, deepening conversations this year. And it's about creating safe space where people can talk about race. And the first year began with racial affinity groups, partly racial affinity groups, and then getting into combined. I'm getting to your question about size. What I want to say is that some powerful work can happen in a space with two facilitators supporting each other and holding space and work. Personally, I think mindfulness practice offers a lot for creating self-compassion, compassion in a space, giving, helping people to learn how to listen to each other, non-judgment, these kinds of things. So I think my colleague is actually in the space today, the colleague that works with me, and we have been working with groups of about maximum 12, would you say, Anna? Yeah, around 12 people, but the potential is for more people. And we've been working online. Okay, and when we started working doing this work, it was overwhelming. It was just like the idea, how could we do this online? But it's actually amazing what one can do, and using breakout rooms, using grounding practices, punctuating the process with grounding practices and self-regulation practices. So of course we're going to do things and talk about things which bring up pain, but it's like really supporting people to hold that, to work with that, and holding a space where they can be contained and feel held, I guess. Yeah, so I'd say I feel very hopeful about the numbers. I mean, yes, we need to be aware of it not being too big, but with 2 people, I think you can work with something like maybe 12, 13 people. Anna didn't say anything. I wonder if she's gone back to sleep.
No, yeah, just put in the chat.
Sorry, Anna, do you want to?
No, I just wanted to say that there were sessions when we had up to 18, 19 people, but just a few, as there were the racial affinity group between 2 and 7, 8 people. But obviously there is this dance of holding small spaces and then coming to hold bigger space. Just stepping back.
What would you say for the facilitators? What are the minimum requirements then? So I hear like non-violent communication and being sort of used to holding space, and then I guess understanding the issues around white supremacy or racial inequality. So anything else that would you say is essential?
Can I add here just to what you had said? I think, and it's coming back to your point directly, I think the thing if you're going to take on that work, what is it that you as a facilitator can hold? The material, your positionality, understanding the material, and what is it that you can hold in your body by way of necessarily holding the numbers. The numbers, yes, can be challenging. I think the biggest challenge is how much can you hold in your body by way of dealing with the material and what it is that you're trying to convey, and also how you meet the questions that come back to you. So for example, I was co-facilitating pre-doctoral students by way of undoing whiteness in the pre-doctoral course with another facilitator. Our groups were about 20 strong. So we had affinity groups, so we had people of the global majority, and we had white students. But I think the important thing there is to the intimate piece, I think, is of value when those groups perhaps move into smaller units. And so the sharing can be held in relationship. And I think that's a really big piece by way of working with this material, having that as a foundation. So if you were to do it, yes, having smaller groups, and then yes, having a larger group to which, you know, that dialogue can take place. But I think it's as much you as the facilitator and what capacity and resources you have to be able to work with the material. So to some degree doesn't really necessitate the amount. It's not the numbers. It's really the ground to which this work is coming from. That's what I would say.
Right. Thank you very much. So we're going slightly over. I'd say we'll stay on till 1:15. If people need to go, I understand. But it'd be lovely if you can stay. We have a hand raised from Janet, but first I'll have a quick look at the chat. So Bernie's commenting on each time she watches a film, she hears more and more and listens more carefully. It's powerful and requires pause and reflection. It works on so many levels. The importance of being is profound. And Koser was also, the discussion and the imagery in the video reminded her of some literature. Her background is in literature, and the Harlem Renaissance issue of Fire. So there's a link there, be interesting to look at. And I was talking about the number in the groups. Koser was saying it's about who you're involving in the work, whose voice should be given space. It's not just about having a seat at the table, but we must also be heard. So yeah, we'll hop over to you, Janet, if you want to unmute and say your question, or if you want to drop it in the chat, just let us know.
Yeah, come on.
Yes, you're unmuted, Janet.
I am. Thank you. I'm afraid I'm sitting in bed, so you'll have to take it as you get me. Thank you for a very profound film. I can't even begin to, having just watched it, I'm sort of, so my deep thanks for what you've created. My interest for this film was sparked. I've lived for 20 years with severe pain. And about 5 years ago, a very close friend of mine said, I want to make a film about you and your pain. And so we've mithered around it for years. She lives in India, and she's an international artist who's worked and created many things. So we started, and I'm learning massively. I'm very much the new partner in this process. So one of my interests in this film was also choices you made within the filming. It felt to me the most embodied film I've ever seen. The breathing, not simply the movement of your bodies, but the way in which you brought attention to your body through the ways you touched it and moved within that touching, really focused that, it made me feel bits of my back that hurt. It made me think about, parts of my body. So I was sort of interested, how did you make those decisions about what you would film, what you would present, what you took from what I'm sure was a massive amount of really interesting material, how you moved that and brought that together in this beautifully created piece of edited film? That's far too big a question for now, but it's the beginning, some of the things that informed that process for you.
I love your question, Janet. I wonder if Noor would like to come in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could feel being drawn into the so thank you. So because obviously, like, I think that's one of our aims really is about touch and embodiment, which is embedded, you know, in somatic practices, and various other kind of healing modality and mindfulness. So I mean, there's lots of material that we co-produce, extra movement. So each moment of coming together was so generative, and so it just kept opening up, you know. And I think in terms of editing, it just practically came down to me editing. Again, I physically edited, but I feel like we kind of all co-authored the edit, because we all looked through the rushes, we all responded. So we were constantly in a process of being generative and reflecting and editing, you know. So one of my questions I have is how do we continue this work? You know, because it was a labor of love. You know, it really was a labor of love. And we are super grateful for the resources that were made available. But there's so much potential, I think, in this way of working. And also because, as we've experienced today, it's really important to be in space with each other. But it's also important, I think, for these kind of digital artifacts to exist, because they can open up conversations, they can transgress boundaries and borders, and connect and you know, and keep building this conversation in and beyond the network. So there isn't a simple answer to it. It is very much about feeling. You know, I also practice Kundalini. I also have deep kind of healing practices myself. So as much as though I work with technology and all forms of technology, be it a pencil to a high-end camera, I'm trying to bring that into the visual medium, the visual expression medium of filmmaking. But I do think that this was definitely, again, it was very co-authored, co-edited, co-scripted. Had we had more time and resources, then it would have been wonderful to have shared some of the technical. So both Ulanah and Andrea could have edited scenes, and that way we would have conversed through little fragments of material and exchanged that. That would have been my ideal way of working, is making everything, you know, empowering all of us, upskilling, and all of our practices lean in and extend, and do you know what I mean, build this in a way. It's kind of like I don't want to sound too flamboyant, but it is like an orchestra. You know, you've got lots of elements and instruments, and you know, you are like a recipe as well, isn't it? It's like cooking together, filmmaking, I think.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I say something, Ulanah, I just want to say after your point, just want to say something quickly.
Yeah, I just want to add there that to Ian's point, I don't know if he's still around, but it relates to you, Janet. Your question is, the process is not prescriptive and is highly intuitive. So I think, I mean, I'm very grateful to being asked, you know, for being asked to be involved. And because I was involved, my back issue presented itself to be looked at. And it's like we went with what people came with in a way. And if you see nothing as an accident, and that everything's on purpose and like synchronicity, and you work with that and trust the process, that, okay, this was said, maybe there's a reason why. This movement was made, maybe there's a reason why. So going beyond the facts and the science of it, and validating the lived experience and what people bring, is to speak to Emma's question as well. that's what it was about. It's like when we're not prescriptive, then we give the patient and the subject and whoever a chance to voice how it should be, how it could be.
Lovely. I just wanted to add there that I think the piece that comes through for me was really just showing our humanity. That's what we're doing. And as I speaking to that piece that you just spoke about, Ulanah, that, oh, you know, what are we coming with? Oh, I had back pain. And so can I be vulnerable enough to show that? Can I dare to reveal that to these people who are holding me, right? And so that is material, if you will, that's data, if you will, but it's you being who you are, where you are, and in that moment. And I think also what's really important, particularly for the context of this film, was really about reclaiming beingness. So as a racialized person, Black, as a woman racialized Black, as alluded to in the film, my humanity is often questioned unconsciously or even consciously. And so for me, the textures, the shots, some of that was part of a deliberate invitation for Noor to capture, because I wanted the close-up with the skin. I wanted people to feel and to see the pores of my face and my neck as it moved. So I wanted to, in my vision, capture something of, yes, my blood is as red as anybody else's, right? And so, yeah, that's what I want to add there.
Yeah, thank you, because it made for me very real. You know, I can intellectually, I intellectually know all of the material about how Black people, Black women's pain is not taken as seriously. I've read it, thought about it, but this somehow made it embodied it for me. It made it not within my body, but it made it real in a way that it works at a body-mind level rather than simply just up in my head. So thank you for that, and for the profound learning from it, which I will go on taking.
Thank you. Thanks, Janet. So we're coming to the end now. Some last few comments about thank you for the film and the expansion possibilities within our bodies that it draws our attention to. And she had to leave, but sent her gratitude. And so much appreciation to all who contributed to this profound film, being with pain, love, life, and holding safe spaces for each other. And obviously making Black bodies and their pain visible within white spaces. Hetty sends a thank you as well. So yeah, thank you so much for making the film and taking time to talk with us today. Thanks for everyone for coming along. And Funmi is saying thank you as well. So I don't know if you have any last comments, Ulanah, Andrea, and Noor, before we go. Thanks from Dara.
I'd love to thank you for your trust and your support with this. I'm really, really grateful, because we didn't mention the word healing, but I think it's very present in the work. It was also healing. Healing is sometimes painful and sometimes joyful, but it was deeply healing and continues to heal. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And thanks, Bernie, who's appeared there as well. He's been helping with the network and very much involved in this too.